It's less than 60 miles by Thin Red Line Games. Some more stuff going on here. Yeah, I've got a new scenario set up. So scenario 1 was a very interesting learning experience. Very useful to play because there are things in this game that are fairly new to me anyway. I think if you've played the old SPI titles that it's based on, you may be more familiar with them, but there's certainly a very interesting chain of command system. The order system is a sort of two-stage process. If you want to change the postures of your units, you have to issue an order and then a posture change. That's there are other ways of doing it, but they all cost time and command and so on. So that's interesting. And the movement, it takes a little bit of getting used to. This sort of multi-cost system for moving into each hex, because virtually every hex is forested. Very few don't have this kind of green forest overlay, and so a lot of the time you're paying movement costs for the terrain type and the obstacles in the hex, and when you're not and you're moving along roads, very often you're having to worry about paying costs for bridges or whatever. So whichever way you look at it, movement is a little bit more in-depth than you might be used to. There are other little things I've discovered in that first scenario playthrough. I'd seen these little blue dots on markers and I knew it meant that they were amphibious, but I hadn't worked out what amphibious meant. And actually I'd been playing the river crossing rules. Well, I don't know, I'd been playing them wrong, but I'd certainly not been playing them to their fullest, which is to say that if you want to cross a minor river, which is these light blue ones, a major river is a dark blue one like the Rhine here. If you want to cross a minor river, like a light blue one, and you want to do a hasty crossing, which costs you fewer movement points but forces you to make a roll to potentially take an attrition point loss, you have to be amphibious capable to do that hasty crossing. If you're not amphibious capable, like say this headquarters you see doesn't have the blue dot, or you can see this artillery up here. Oh no, that one does, but this artillery here, rocket artillery, no blue dot there. Not amphibious capable, can't do hasty crossings, has to do prepared crossings. So that's one thing I discovered. Another thing I discovered was that prepared crossings are not simply paying the movement point cost. You want to do a prepared crossing of a river, it costs you an engineer point, and if I remember rightly, you also have to have a headquarters in range. So that's worth remembering, because that takes another level of planning. I'm just going to check that out. Prepared crossings in the rules. I'm just coming down here to this rule book. Prepared crossing prerequisites, you can see them here. River hexside to be crossed must have at least one friendly unit adjacent. One of the hexes adjacent to the river hexside must be within the command range of a friendly HQ, and during the engineer phase you subtract an engineer point and place an engineer marker on the river hex side. So it's a bit like having a temporary panel bridge, but it's a lot quicker. You just do it there and then. And then you can cross. Yeah, obviously if you're going to be trying to use it as a major route, you want to get a more permanent bridge in place. So that's another thing I found. So amphibious units, prepared crossings. Next thing I was doing, I'm again not sure I was doing it completely correctly. If you want to move away from units in certain postures, you have to disengage. So I thought that there are information counters for half engagement and engagement, but there's also postures that are considered blocking. For example, this recon posture. The orange stripe means it's blocking. And what that means is that if you want to move away from a unit in a blocking posture, if you're next to an enemy unit which has this sort of blocking capability, it means that you have to disengage from it in order to be able to move away. And that means making a roll on a disengagement table, which you can also apply combat support point to. So you can use sort of helicopter or artillery support to improve your chances of disengagement. But there's potentially the chance that you don't manage to disengage, or you have to take an attrition point, or you lose movement points doing so. It costs 4 movement points to make a disengagement attempt, so it's not trivial. It costs you a third of your movement allowance, plus a roll to move away once something in, say, recon posture has got up to you. So things like this have a new level of sort of tactical value, because if you look at stuff in March Assault, say we've got these, in this scenario we've got these tasty, I assume they're T80s, tasty 9.6 armour units, which we've got in March Assault. See, that's not blocking. So although it's more effective in combat, it doesn't lock the opposing units in combat unless you get a result on the combats table which locks them in combat. So there's a really interesting mix here of sort of combined arms that you need to have recon going in to try to lock down and block your target, and then your follow-up units coming in to try and overrun them while they can't disengage, or while they're forced to try and disengage, and so on. So that is interesting as well, and the whole thing means that there's a huge amount of sort of nuance in this system. Yes, there are lots of counters, and yes, it's quite front-loaded in terms of, you know, picking a posture for every single unit that you're placing down and having to think about its function. Again, this is not a game of throwing the counters on the map and hoping it all works out, because it won't. You have to have assigned a sort of mission to units and groups of units in a way that reminds me of more of the battalion combat series, the BCS, the new one from MMP. This one over here, Last Blitzkrieg and Baptism by Fire, and I haven't got the latest one, which is Blazing Chariots, but I just haven't got the space for a 3-map game, and I can't see myself getting it to the table in any time soon. By the time I've got the space for it, they'll have done a couple more, so I might as well buy the ones they do in 5 years' time. Anyway, yeah, that kind of combined arms philosophy that this game promotes is reminding me more of that Battalion Combat series. But then, unlike that series, it's got this kind of command and control layer adding to it as well. So all very, very cool. This is a properly detailed and fascinating looking game, which is giving really crazily interesting decisions. It's kind of making my head explode a bit at the moment, but in a good way. It's making it, you know, it's making me think of all kinds of possibilities and options, and it feels like there ought to be ways to really make good decisions in this game. Not gamey decisions, but good decisions about how to manage your forces and your orders processes, which is really exciting. So that's, yeah, really interesting. So the first scenario ended with on about turn 4, I gave up. The American NATO forces had withdrawn a bit too quickly, and although they hadn't taken any losses, had pulled back to a line, were forced back behind the Fulda River, and I counted up the points for that the Warsaw Pact had at the end of turn 4, or their move at the halfway through turn 4, and they had 18 points, and that was a substantial victory. 20 was going to be a comprehensive victory, whatever it's called, a total victory. I can't remember the terminology, but yeah, and to be honest, while it was great for learning, there wasn't enough counterplay in the NATO forces there to make it anything more than a sort of stalling withdrawal exercise. They could have stand around and fought, and I did fight one combat which ended in in a stalemate, no attrition losses on either side, but it was an outlier combat where the Warsaw Pact hadn't quite got their artillery and stuff in range. It wasn't going to stay that good for the US, and they had to pull back some more. This scenario is 14 turns, and you can see some blue cubes over here outside Frankfurt on the north-south motorway on the east side of Frankfurt, and they're worth, each of those locations is worth 50 victory points, and a total Soviet Warsaw Pact victory is 51 victory points. So these cubes are pretty much auto wins for the Warsaw Pact. If they can get any of those, then they're probably quids in terms of winning the game. Certainly winning the game, perhaps not with the comprehensive victory if they've taken losses and what have you, but that's where they are aiming for. And so I've set the Warsaw Pact forces up here. They've got another one of the rifle infantry divisions, motorised infantry divisions, is going to come on as reinforcements next turn. So they've got another one of these kind of groupings to come on the edge here, and I'm planning to scoot those pretty much through Eisenach down this road here and drive those reinforcements along this road here between whatever this place is called, Bad Hersfeld, along the motorway towards that blue cube up there. And these two groupings, we've got this is 79th Guard tank or something, I would think GT would be, because there are these have got the 9.6 armoured in them. I think that'll be something like 79th Guard tank division, and these, the good old 27th Guard motorised infantry. They're going to drive into Fulda to begin with, and then we'll see. I think I'd like to push up this way and try and go down this road towards these two blue cubes here, and have those two divisions supporting each other in that. And I'm not keen on coming along this motorway here towards this blue cube. That doesn't look like a great route, just because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, something like 7 bridges along that route. They'll be far too easy to blow up, and it looks like it would just get bogged down in river crossings, and that just looks awful. So I don't really want to play along that motorway. So we're going to try and avoid that and cut up through the hills and try and drop in centrally into this area and hope that 14 turns is enough. That's the Soviet Warsaw Pact plan. And now I'm just doing the organisation of the defence. So as in the scenario 1, the US 5th Corps has got some of this 11th Cav. It's got a armoured Cav unit in here and an armoured Cav unit up over there. They're allowed to move 10 hexes. These are just the initial sort of central point, and then you can move them about. And this grouping back here, each of these can move 5 hexes, and so we've got a job to set them up and then choose postures for all of them. We've also got some assets down here, some mine bridges, some defensive positions, our supply hubs, and our close air support points. So the question now turns to the Americans as to exactly how they're intending to defend, what lines they're intending to defend across, if any. Are they trying to charge forward towards the Fulda River and hold there, or are they trying to just screen the Fulda River and slowly fall back. If they're falling back, at what point do they make their stand? The reason they have to try and make those decisions now is again down to this order system. If they're trying to move, they're going to be, if they want to move rapidly, they need to be in sort of road column. The question then is how they maintain a network of command and control so that they can deploy rapidly out of road column into combat formations without just hitting Warsaw Pact coming the other way. How much time is it going to take to get those orders down through the system and make a change, and how much time do they have? And those are really interesting judgments to have to make, and not ones that you often have to make in a war game. It's really refreshing to see something of this depth. So setting up the US forces isn't just a case again of slotting them on the map somewhere that looks handy. It's a question of looking at the orders charts and the postures charts and looking 2 or 3 turns ahead and saying, where am I trying to get them to, and in what orders am I going to be when I get there? Really fascinating game system. I'm hoping it plays in as exciting a fashion as it suggests, because it's really really interesting. End of the first turn here then in the Spearhead scenario in less than 60 miles. You can see how little progress the Warsaw Pact made. The dotted yellow line is the East-West German border, and they've made it about 2 hexes at the most across here. That's because of the penalties for crossing this border. 4 movement point penalty for that, a +1 movement point penalty for road hex, gnarly, hilly, forested terrain, and in this case because of a screening unit down here making this unit force march to even make it this far, and he took the chance and didn't get any attrition points added. So that's what the Warsaw Pact have managed to achieve. Not very much in this first turn, but that movement point penalty really does hamper them. They should accelerate a little bit more this turn. Lots of interest, well, not much movement, but lots of interest over on the American side, who I haven't moved yet. I'm in their movement phase. I said it was the end of turn 1. I'm lying. I'm in the movement, just coming into the movement phase for the Americans. I should call them NATO really, but this is all American troops. There's no West Germans or anything. So what they've done is issue an order to one of their brigades here. So they've got a brigade order which is costing 2 command points, and that drops their maximum command points down to 1 until this order is revealed. So for the next 2 turns, or for this turn and the next, they spent that final command point on allocating some electronic warfare points to one of their HQs, this one in here. But what that means is that for the next couple of turns they've got 1 command point, which is going to restrict the number of HQs they can move, or their ability to move depots, or their ability to assign air points to recon. So I really like the way that these command points act as a definite limit. They're in short supply. It's not the kind of game that creates this command point mechanic and then gives you so many of them you can never spend them all, and it's all a bit pointless. They are actually a definite limit on the amount of activity you can get through. So that's cool. Really cool, in fact. So the American plan is to try and push forward with a bunch of units more up into this area here, outside Fulda, behind the river, and then use the order that they've laid down in a couple of turns' time once they've got those guys in better positions to switch them into more defensive postures, and then perhaps do the same up in this area with a group of units up here. So they're going to concentrate down here and try and shift forward, and then concentrate up here and try and shift forward, and get a defensive line running roughly down the line of this road, maybe here and in here. So that's what they're aiming for. The other thing they've done is got some engineers in play here constructing another defensive position, because they'd like to work on their defensive positions. They've got another one down here, another one down here. They blew a bridge here, and now they're about to shift forward. Let's see how far they get. Okay, the Soviet half of turn 2 done here in less than 60 miles, Spearhead scenario, and this reinforcement motorised infantry division has come on. I think I've made a terrible mistake because I've set orders for it to change some divisional orders here, which means going for the next few turns without any command points, because those divisional orders cost 4 command points and that's all we've got. So that is going to be tricky, because that means the next two turns at least having no command points to spend to move depots, move headquarters, throw up reconnaissance, do anything. And it may be that because their headquarters has come on in this kind of movement mode rather than deployed, and I can't change that because I haven't got any command points. It may be that I can't get all the units close enough together to even command them all to when I get this order functioning, so it could all be a complete mess. Who knows, we'll see how it turns out. It's a lot of fun anyway. So let's try it and see if it works. I mean, it could just have been easier to bring everything on in sort of March assault and not take the risk messing around with orders like this, but that seemed like the sort of dullard way out, the kind of unexperimental way. You're never going to learn what works if you aren't willing to take the risks, especially in a system like this. So I thought, hell, I'll throw the order in, I'll see how it works out, and if it all goes pear-shaped, well, it's a 14-turn game, we've probably got time to rectify it, hopefully. So now we're into the Americans, who also have no command points at the moment due to their orders being on the track. So they're going to be moving forward, trying to get into some better positions. End of turn 2 here then in less than 60 miles, and this American unit here withdrew out of Fulda, having made a disengagement roll with some support from some helicopters, which didn't take any casualties from anti-air fire. So that was good. What wasn't so good was the mined bridge failed to do anything, so there's still intact bridging, an intact bridge there for the Russians to try and use. And beyond that, the Americans have managed to push up into these hexes here with units in screen. So they're now screening attempts to push across the Fulda River by 27th Guard here, who've got to try and work out what to do next. So this American force has actually got up into screening positions relatively quickly, far quicker than the Russians have managed to get across the ground from there, mainly due to the road networks being much more direct, and because they don't have the 4 movement point penalty, and because they're not facing units in screening which they may have to engage in combat, and therefore have to be in more aggressive postures that force them to move slower. So all in all, quite a tough job for the Warsaw Pact here. It's not like they have overwhelming force as far as I can see, but they do have opportunities next turn. We've got some nice units down in this area, some of this 9/6 armour up against some screening units that should be able, with some artillery support, to give these forces an interesting time, shall we say. So we'll see how turn 3 goes, where then, well, the Warsaw Pact are hoping to start engaging some of the opposing forces and working out how to solve this little problem around here where they're trying to get across the river, but it's going to be an awful slog unless they can work out an alternate route, and they've got to try and work out what the hell this lot is doing as well with its orders, because it looks like they're not going to be in the fight today the way I've set this up. They're all in road, and they're going to be in road until 6 o'clock tonight, and then it's going to take them a couple of turns to deploy, and it's going to be the night before they're able to do anything. So let's just see how many turns 14 turns is. We've turn 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so okay, so they're not going to be deployed. You know, they're going to get their orders then, and then they're going to deploy then, and they're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 turns in the action, having spent 7 turns just moving from the edge of the map up to here and getting into some sort of formation. That's really, really inefficient. And I may have to play this again and try something else, but we'll see how it goes this time round.